the medical community splitting in at least two different ways. So you have people who are still clinging on to the old paradigm where medicine is the end all be all. And then you have people who are asking the fundamental whys. I would be really upset if I took my car to the mechanic and the check engine light is on and I said, something's happening. I hear a banging under the hood. And the mechanic, after taking a couple of hours looking at it, coming back and saying, well, I don't know what's causing this, but we could remove the check engine light if you want. I would be furious and then charge me for this.
Yeah.
In my mind, who would accept this kind of thing? But
Right.
you have a lot of people who are still clinging on to that medical paradigm where they go into the doctor having back pain or something, and they said, well, I don't know what's causing it, but we'll give you a prescription medication
Right.
to solve the pain. So this is basically removing the check engine light. We don't know what's going on, but we'll just kind of fix it, put a Band-Aid over it. Then you've got the people who would get mad, like me, and say, why? Why am I suffering like this? Why do I have back pain? Why do I have foot pain? Why? And how do I get to the root of the problem and solve it and nip it in the bud? And that's where the divergence is happening. People on the one side are okay with getting prescription medications. And on the other side are saying, let me get fixed. Please fix me.
Right.
I have this body for the next 30, 40, 50 years. I don't want a medication for the next 50 years. Thank you very much. Because it doesn't keep me alive. It doesn't keep me healthy. So,
Especially when, I mean, we're all constantly exposed. I don't care what kind of media you consume, but there is a constant stream of exposure to the pharmaceutical industry. And if you listen to any single commercial presenting a new drug for, eczema, well, if you have eczema, use this cream, but oh, hey, by the way, it's going to weaken your immune system. It's going to, impact your ability to fight infections. I just don't know how people essentially in their logical mind can how do you listen to that commercial and say, oh yeah, sign me up, I need that cream right now, instead of taking a look back and saying, well, why do I have eczema? Why do I have psoriasis? Oh, well, my mom had psoriasis. Okay, well, why did your mom have psoriasis? Right. And there's all of these things that I think that we consider to be not tied to our diet and lifestyle because that's what we've been taught to believe as a society. And it's through functional medicine and through people like us who are talking about these things and sharing that, well, it's actually your diet and your lifestyle that have a bigger impact on the manifestation of your symptoms. And like the etiology isn't necessarily genetic, right? Especially in things like eczema and autoimmune diseases where people believe that it's totally their genes that are the issue and that the only way to fix it is through allopathic and pharmaceuticals. And so I'm excited to get into this conversation with you because it seems like maybe you have that same philosophy that I do. I think it's important for us to share kind of how we've been trained and how we approach these kind of situations. So I've gotten a list of some frequently asked questions put together about functional medicine to really help our audiences understand what is it going to look like as we step into this world of holistic care. And you ready to get into that?
absolutely. Let's go.
Perfect. So one of the first questions that I have that I want to just talk about is talking about functional nutrition. We hear about functional medicine all the time, but what is functional nutrition and how does it differ from traditional nutritional care or nutrition coaching? And let's get into that.
Absolutely. And so I have a background in integrative medicine. And so when I found this program that's integrative and functional nutrition, because I've always believed that nutrition is paramount to health. It's not only paramount, but it's the foundation. So what we put inside of our bodies translates to how our health is on the outside. And when I found this program, integrative and functional nutrition, I didn't really understand the functional nutrition at first. But then as I went through the program, I understood more and more. We're getting into all of the nuances, what different
On a
molecules
different level.
yeah,
Yeah.
on a different level. The molecules, all of the different chemicals and the chemical reactions do.
Mhm.
And before I had understood the Krebs cycle, which is also the citric acid cycle, and all of the different nuances that happens, the hormonal levels that we have, because we have a lot of hormones that
Mhm.
dictate every function from how we feel to our sex drive to
Mhm.
even how pissed off we get on the highway, So,
Yeah. And to
so
our sleep, right? Our
yeah,
sleep is
our
dictated by
sleep,
hormones. If we get a
our
cortisol spike, it will wake you up. And yeah,
exactly
hormones are
how
integral to every facet of physiology and life. Yeah.
everything, including what we eat, how we eat, everything about that. So the
Mhm.
functional nutrition gets into every facet of this and it
Mhm.
overlays, if you will, all
Yeah.
of the different aspects of nutrition. And if you walk into a normal nutritionist, they will give you the macronutrients and the caloric intake that you need to maintain, lose weight, or gain weight.
Mhm.
There's nothing in it that really gets involved with, well, maybe you need this much protein to put on body mass.
Mhm.
You need this much of that to lose weight. There's all those nuances there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when you get into the functional nutrition side, you understand what you eat, why you eat, what nutrients you need, what nutrients you're lacking, what the nutrients do inside of your body from a molecular level, and
Mhm.
how they interact with your chemicals and your hormone levels,
Right.
and so more.
And yeah. And so by taking this deeper dive, essentially, when you go to your doc, you're not feeling well. Maybe you have an idea of what's going on, and the labs that they run are very different from the ones that we look at. Right. So
Absolutely.
when you go to a functional medicine provider or a functional nutrition provider, we're going to look at things like we're going to do a urine test. We're going to look at your stool. We're going to look at blood work, and we're going to evaluate a lot of the biomarkers for disease, which I think are often overlooked in the allopathic medical model, like especially things like fasting insulin. You and I know that our specialty aligns in metabolic diseases, right? And so I think we have this mindset and this awareness really that the majority of the chronic illnesses that we see in today's social reality, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, eczema, psoriasis, anxiety, depression, various multi-system interactive clinical conditions that all kind of tie down to the same cause. It just kind of blows my mind because at the end of the day, these are all inflammatory diseases.
Right.
When you look at the body not as, the sum of its parts, but from a approach that considers each and every single organ system and each and every single structure of the human body, and we take that look to, what? Your metabolic syndrome is hypertension, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Those are the leading three. And all of these have the same cause. And the reason that they have the same cause is not because of your necessarily just because of your genetic predisposition to having them, but it's your environmental exposures and it's your daily lifestyle that triggers the genetic code and that genetic signal to say, hey, we need to turn on hypertension or we need to turn off hypertension because we've made lifestyle changes to align with the desired outcome of not just putting that band-aid on. And I love that you said that because it's so commonly spoke about these days that Western medicine just puts a band-aid on it because that's what pharmaceuticals do. They're not getting to that root cause that we're looking for. Like, we're not looking for the pancreatic, beta cell dysfunction that causes type 2 diabetes. We just say, hey, we got a patient in my chair. I have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and diagnose you. Here's the labs that I want to get done. I'll see you back next week. Oh, looks like next week is here and your A1C is at 7. So I'm going to go ahead and prescribe you metformin. Have a good day. Like, that's not how we approach things. So how would you handle that situation?
Oh, yeah, we would get into the root causes. And in my undergrad, because I've
Mhm.
been in the medical community for quite a while, 15, 20 years ago, I was taking a course, and it was more allopathic than it was integrative. And I we were doing mock patient trials, and
Yeah.
the student that I was working with, we were going back and forth. I was the doctor, and then she was the patient, and vice versa. And I was at that point being the doctor, and then my patient was in front of me with insomnia, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the professor came over and stopped me dead in my tracks and said, "Oh, you can't cure them. You
Mm.
have to stop, prescribe them a medication, and then bring them back in for another appointment. So you have to schedule another appointment." And we had to do this in 7 minutes.
Wow.
And I thought, I'm done. What am I here if I can't work with her in fixing her insomnia? Because
Yeah.
insomnia plagues everything. It could be a hormonal thing. It could be stress related, which is hormones.
Mm-hmm.
It could be
Well,
menopausal,
stress
which
triggers the hormones.
yeah, hormone. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
so it's this interwoven. Is it children? Because I tell you what, when my son was a baby, did I sleep? No, there was no
No.
sleep.
No.
I slept
No.
when he slept. That was a joke. So
It's the biggest lie of motherhood, isn't it?
sleep when the baby sleeps. Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
So I can't remember what caused her insomnia, but I basically cured it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, should there be a follow-up? Absolutely, just to
Yeah.
make sure that you're still maintaining it. But getting into it, you find the cause, the root cause, and then you establish the change. And that's the goal right there, is trying to take a person who has been doing something for 5, 10, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
and slowly incorporating changes so that it fixes the problem. And you
Mm-hmm.
do that, you could put a medication on it, but I don't plan on prescribing any medications after my PhD.
No.
I'm going to
Unless
prescribe.
absolutely necessary, right? If you have a
Right,
clinical situation where you've got an A1C of 11 and we're like, oh, we need to hit the brakes on this one,
right,
right?
right.
We've got to refer you to your primary care provider to maybe get you started on some metformin or some sort of low dose so that we can do like a combined therapy, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
So,
that's, I
yes.
mean, not to cut you off, but like,
No, you're
I
fine.
mean, that's the core of the integrative model, right?
Mhm.
It brings together, it's not this mindset that it has to be one way or another, right? It doesn't have to just be holistic and it doesn't just have to be allopathic. It's meeting the patient where they're at. And this is, I say this all the time to my patients. It's like, I want to meet you where you need me most, right?
Right.
We are going to, if your goal is to go from A to B, but you have maybe 7 different situations that we need to address in order to get you into that state of optimal health, then we need to kind of triage things here. We need to set a priority and say, look, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to give up soda? Are you willing to give up your standard Western diet? Are you willing to give up a sedentary lifestyle? Okay, you are. Great. Now, how are you willing to do that? Are you just wanting to run and maybe you just walk 20 minutes a day? Is that the extent of your ability to see how you can incorporate physical activity into your life? Is that as far as you can see? If so, that's fine. I will meet you where you're at, right? And then if we can add another layer to that with your nutrition and say maybe you can't jump onto, a fully, the elimination diet that removes all of these triggers, right? And I'm not talking a carnivore diet, I'm not talking a ketogenic diet. I'm talking the elimination diet where we're just removing out those main food sensitivity foods that, I mean, we're talking corn, tomatoes, eggs even right away. All those foods that are really well associated with the propagation of chronic diseases, right? If that's all you can remove right now, fine. And if we have to do that one at a time, that's fine. So the point is, it's this approach that is that integrative piece, right? So you've done a great job explaining functional medicine and how we take that deeper look. But I think often one of the bigger questions, I guess, would be, well, what is integrative, right? What is integrative
Yeah, yeah.
medicine? And sometimes that means also working with your primary care provider who is in alignment with the allopathic medical model. Maybe you're still on some medications. Maybe our goal is to titrate you down to where you're no longer on any of your medications.
And
And
that
that
happens.
requires a collaborative partnership, right? It's
Right.
not just one road or another. In some cases, it requires time, it requires teamwork, it requires a lot of willingness on your part to say, you know what, I'm ready for the change. I'm ready to take this step into health and wellness. And maybe that's just like one piece of the puzzle for you if you have multiple pieces.
Yeah.
But great. I love how you explained that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have when I have friends who are kind of battling the allopathic medicine approach,
Mm-hmm.
one of them, for example, she had a sinus pressure build up
Mm.
and she couldn't figure out what was going on. So she went in and it kind of acted like a cold, like a sinus
Mm-hmm.
pressure cold.
Yeah.
She went in and she was prescribed medication. I said, well, if it's a virus, and she's got a bunch of other ailments too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, you probably should, cut back on your soda and a couple of other things,
Yeah.
not giving any kind of medical advice, just friendly advice.
Right.
And it didn't go away. So she went back in and they prescribed stronger medication.
Mm.
It
Mm-hmm.
didn't go away. It
Probably
didn't
an
go.
antibiotic too.
So she went back in, a different doctor prescribed because she went in and said, I have a sinus infection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So went back in. Now, in a functional approach, why? What is causing this? Is it
Mm-hmm.
a virus? Is it a bacteria? Is it fungus? Is there something wrong with your immune system? Do you have where is the infection at? What's going
Mm-hmm.
on? I believe it was the day before Christmas. She lost a tooth.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she
Not
had an infection in her tooth
good.
that
Mm-hmm.
caused an infection to go up into her sinus cavity.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my background is actually dentistry and I
Oh,
worked
okay.
for 2 years in oral surgery. And so a lot of the times if you have an abscess of one of those maxillary teeth and oftentimes people have some really long roots on their teeth and even if the root doesn't puncture through the sinus cavity, which is pretty common, like I know that the roots of my maxillary teeth actually puncture my sinus cavity. So if I ever had to have a tooth removed, there's a need for like a sinus graft.
Oh,
Um,
dear.
so often, and so if that were the situation and she had that tooth out, and oftentimes if you get the x-ray and maybe the tech who takes the image, if they do it from the wrong angle, those ones you have to insert into your mouth and bite down, nobody likes them. um, Oftentimes if that's at the wrong angle, it won't show exactly the appropriate length of the root. It can make them look really small or it can make them look elongated.
Oh,
So the point is, if the doc looks at the pic or the X-ray, let's be casual here. If the doc looks at the pic and it's not looking to perforate the sinus, they're not going to have any concerns necessarily about the need for like an augment on the sinus. But it does create a direct path between your mouth and the nasal cavity or the sinus cavity too. And guess where the majority of your bacteria are?
the
Your
mouth.
mouth. Hey, guess what? You've got a hole into your sinus. Where's that bacteria going to go? Those little buggers are little small bugs. Like they're going to go up and find any dark, moist cave they can find, right?
Right, right,
Sinus cavity is a great place to live if you're a microbe. Like,
right,
come on.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
did any
yeah.
of the doctors
The integrative model, though, that's the
right,
integrative model. That's the functional model. That's looking at the whole picture. We're not
exactly,
playing I spy a sinus infection. So here's a sticker for it. Let's
right.
investigate it a little bit. Let's be detectives, not just
E
observers, right?
exactly, and part of that problem too that I saw, and I've seen several other times too, so this is a big problem. A doctor will diagnose you with a sinus infection. The
Mm-hmm.
medicine prescribed isn't fixing it, so you go back
No.
in and they look at your chart and say, "You have a sinus infection." Well, do you have a sinus infection or is it a tooth infection creating the sinus
Mm-hmm.
infection? They
Mm-hmm.
just look at the chart and they say, well, the medicine that you were prescribed isn't working. I'm going to give you stronger medicine,
Stronger medicine. Yep.
stronger medicine, and that will
Yep.
fit, right? That will remove the check engine light.
Yeah. Totally.
Yep.
I like how you circled that back. So moving back into the nutrition side of things, I'm curious to get your thoughts because in the realm of functional medicine, there's a very strong proclivity to the plant-based diet paradigm.
Oh,
How
absolutely.
does how has the training, I guess, and how has your understanding of the role of plants in the diet for the reversal and the management even of chronic diseases, how has that affected you in your individual philosophy on maybe the ketogenic diet, right? And how this all interplays with one another? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh boy. So, like I said,
Oh boy.
I've been dabbling in this stuff since, well, let's say 2005,
Yeah.
and lightly in 2005, and it's been a roller coaster since. And I've actually went vegan for a little bit because this community, this medical community, is just proliferated with people who believe that veganism and vegetarianism is the way to go.
Right.
And it's really hard to do a ketogenic diet when you are focused on plants.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up switching to, what is that? Morningstar
Mm-hmm.
and
Ultra
um,
processed plant-based meat
yeah,
alternatives.
this was before the Impossible Meats. Corn, I think,
Yeah.
with a Q. There
Q.
was,
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
There
there
were a
were
couple
several.
different. Yeah.
Right. So I would end up dabbling with a lot of that kind of processed meat, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
tofu, a lot of things. And I ended up getting really sick and fat. Now, I had come out of a really bad relationship, morbidly obese, 250 pounds ish, approximately. I stopped
Yeah.
weighing at 237 pounds. I stopped weighing myself, because I didn't want to
Yeah.
face the music. I was
Right.
depressed, everything you could just imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was
So
about
sorry.
250 pounds. Oh yeah. And so I lost a lot of weight. If you could just
Yeah.
imagine, I don't even remember exactly how much I weighed, but um, I was pretty thin at that point. Let's say a size 14.
Okay.
So whatever that is. And I started gaining the weight again. I was eating the corn and the Morningstar meat with, let's say, pasta or anything like that. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of transitioned out of this ketogenic realm that I was in for, at that point, uh, 6 years, 5 years, and
Okay.
then yeah, so lost all
So this
that
is
weight.
before the doctoral journey even started.
Oh yeah, yeah. This was actually before my master's journey.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and I was still in this. I'm trying to think of where I was at in my life. A bachelor's, because I had a bachelor's in integrative and um, therapeutic practices, and I was
Right.
really on an Oriental kind of medicine base, but I also dabbled in
Mhm.
Ayurveda and a few other realms too.
Yep.
So I started this plant-based journey, and I lasted 8 months.
Okay.
And I had gained back so much weight that my 14s didn't fit anymore. My
Mm,
16s that I had held on to didn't fit anymore. And my
mm,
18s were starting to fit very well
mm,
on a plant based. And people would say, oh, no, you lose weight on a plant based diet. I
yeah.
did the opposite. I
Right.
introduced carbs back into my diet. I introduced all
Mhm.
these fake meats back into my diet, and I got sick. My face started breaking out again. I
Mhm.
started getting back knee.
Mhm.
Weird. I've never had back knee in my life, and then all of a sudden I had back knee, and I was told that milk causes the acne
Right.
and the back knee,
Right.
and and I could say that probably the hormones in the milk probably does, but if you
Totally.
get
Yeah. I can see that.
the
'Cause
milk
it's
that hasn't
lactose,
been
right? It's
treated
sugar. Mhm.
right, and plus cows. For a lot of our audience that don't know this already, cows are injected with hormones, synthetic hormones that
Mhm.
activate their milk production.
Milk production.
So
Yep.
they're already birthed a calf. And so
Mhm.
now they're in milk production, but to entice more milk production, they're
Right.
injected with RBST and a few other hormones to
Right.
keep that process going.
Yeah.
And so that gets into the
And I mean,
milk.
that's in all the milks. I mean, it's in all the grocery stores, right?
Hmm.
That's your standard. It doesn't matter if it's whole, skim, 2%, 1%. That's all the milk, right? That's
Exactly.
yeah.
So you need to find farms that don't process their,
Yeah.
little family owned farms is
Right.
what you need to
Yeah.
do. So,
Yeah, I mean, we get raw milk here in Idaho.
oh,
So
okay, good.
directly from a local farm. Yeah.
Oh, good. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
tons better.
you still don't drink it all day, right? You don't just throw back a glass of milk, right? It's a supplement for the diet, right? It's a good little
Mhm,
source of calcium. You've got
mhm.
some good probiotics in there when they've not been stripped through the homogenizing and the pasteurization process,
Right.
right? You've got a little bit of vitamin D, and humans aren't we weren't evolutionarily drinking milk, right?
Exactly.
Milk is for infancy, right? It's to allow the body to grow and the brain to develop with the DHA and get us into a physiological state where we can consume real food, right? After the weaning process, just like animals in nature, humans are meant to remove that from
Mhm.
their diet. So, for anyone out there who still believes the got milk, poster that's hanging in the elementary school cafeteria. Like, no, you don't need to drink a glass of milk every single day. You don't need those growth hormones at all anymore. Like, you're no longer an infant. You're no longer in that weaning process. Milk has no real value,
Exactly.
especially if you're buying the homogenized pasteurized product that you're getting from Costco,
Mhm.
right? I do stand on the fence of a little bit of dairy in the diet if it's raw or if it's fermented, right? Because the introduction of just a little bit of gut bacteria is good, right?
Mhm.
There are benefits.
Yeah, and I eat cheese,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
a good staple of my diet. So I'm
Right.
trying to remove a lot of the cheese that I eat,
Yeah.
but I eat cheese every day. So there's that.
Well, that's okay. A little bit of cheese every day is good. So how do you think I'm glad that we're kind of on this topic of dairy, and it makes me think of how, because I know my thoughts. I know how I have interpreted the past 3 years and how I've been taught to practice from a clinical perspective. And I know how the functional medicine world views things like meat and dairy and saturated fat. And these are still very villainized in the functional medicine realm. So
Right.
how does that, I guess, affect moving forward with the new research that's saying, hey, you know what? Saturated fat is not the enemy. We actually need fat in our diet in order to lose fat. Your brain is made up of, what is it, 80% cholesterol? You
Yeah.
have to have cholesterol in the diet. Like, how do you interpret
Yeah.
and understand the current, like, because if somebody comes to me and they say, you know what, Courtney, you're a functional medicine nutritionist. I understand the functional medicine philosophy, but I don't practice in a way that is in alignment with, let's call it classical functional medicine, like we mentioned earlier, right? So, how do you think that the functional medicine model and the functional nutrition model address like the dietary restrictions or preferences, even on a provider basis, right? How do you think all of that plays together?
Oh boy. That
Well,
is
let's
such a good
narrow it down a little bit. Sorry,
question.
for like developing personal nutrition plans,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay, because I had all these thoughts in my head.
That's a big question. We could talk for hours on that. Like,
I know. I know. We don't have enough time.
I mean, if
So
you were on a call one-on-one with Dr. Mark Hyman, right, the father of functional medicine, and he's sitting here and arguing plants are integral because, I mean, I've read his book. I've got it, The Pegan Diet, right?
mhm,
It's very plant-based paleo. It's what we've been trained on. We've been trained on the elimination diet, get the red meat out, get the saturated fat out, introduce all the plants. But what if that doesn't align with your views as a practitioner and your client's views? It's sticky. Go ahead.
that's I know that's that divergence that I was talking about too. You've got the allopathic camp as well,
Mhm.
and they will listen to the old literature of
And the
saturated
allopathic camp
fat.
says, sorry, not to cut you, but the allopathic camp says nutrition doesn't affect the disease process.
Yeah. So yeah,
Which has
but
nothing to
then
do with that.
some
That's the mindset.
some doctors will tell you do not eat red meat
Mhm,
and stay away from that kind of stuff. I'm going to bring this up because this was a fascinating study. There was a N of one, which means
mhm.
one
Case
doctor.
study. Yep.
One doctor went out and he decided to prove that statins weren't all that in a bag of beans. He ended up he ended up eating Oreos to lower his LDL cholesterol.
Uh-huh.
And you will
And it
see
works.
that. Yeah. Yeah, and I found that absolutely hysterical because is LDL cholesterol the end all be all marker for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, the whole 9 yards, right?
Mhm,
What is the primary marker of that? Again, we're going
mhm,
into the statins. You go in there with a cholesterol level of over 200, and a
mhm.
doctor will write you a prescription right then and there
Statin.
of a statin.
Mhm.
Take your pick, right?
And if you don't have insulin resistance already, you can go ahead and sign off on that guarantee that you are about to be insulin resistant.
Right,
Yep.
right. And then the nutritionist side and stuff like that will say you have to go plant-based in order to drop your levels, in order to get healthier, in order to drop your LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, and
Mhm,
promote cardiovascular health, you need to go plant-based.
mhm,
Now, going back to when I went plant-based, because I thought that was the end all be all for just a minute. So I removed my ketogenic self and my
mhm.
ketogenic and my flexitarian, or well, I was kind of merging this flexitarian lifestyle that I had going on there for a minute. I just went into veganism. I just jumped right in.
Mhm.
I had gained weight. I looked miserable. I looked awful. Was it healthy? No. And when I went back for my numbers, surprise, surprise, my HbA1c also went up. So here I was with a low insulin
Low
level.
LDL. Yep.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. But my HbA1c went back up. And then my metabolic syndrome started to take off again.
Yeah.
So I dumped that lifestyle and I went back onto the ketogenic lifestyle. I was like, nope, this is the most awful thing I've ever done. So when I transitioned back into, so I got my master's and then did a lot of work here and there. And then I started my PhD program and they're still pushing this plant-based paradigm. It's not the healthiest.
All that in a bag of beans.
Yeah, all that in a bag of beans. It's not the healthiest.
But that's because of the plant toxins, right? And I feel like that is worth noting, right?
When anti-nutrients.
Yes, they are anti-nutrients, and fiber is one of the biggest anti-nutrients out there. And because it quite literally blocks the passageway in your GI system. Fiber is not digestible. There is a difference between digestible fiber and non-digestible fiber. And plants, legumes, fruits, all of this fiber that we're eating because we believe it's going to improve our levels and improve the LDL and improve the A1C. These are actually blocking and inhibiting the absorption of the little bit of nutritional value that is localized to the food that you're eating. Right. So beans, for example, right? Beans are a great source of plant protein. Well, no, actually they're not. When you consider the bioavailability, which is a really, really fancy way of saying how much protein are you going to get from the beans at the end of the day after you've broken them down into their counterparts of fiber, right? And you have to also consider the action of the plant toxin in beans, which is lectins, right? Which also have a number of various pathways that they affect the body. I don't think we need to go into that for this call, but you have to consider for bioavailability all of the different ways that the bean is going to be broken down. And at the end of the day, if you're eating, 16 grams of protein from a cup of beans, I'm just spitballing numbers here, then the reality is you're only going to get like 2 or 3 grams of protein because that's how much is going to be absorbed at the end of the day after fiber has done blocked off the road, so to say, in the GI system. And then the beans are broken down and having to be detoxified because of the lectins, right? You're not getting that much protein, but you're going to be increasing all of these negative implications that come along with eating plant toxins.
Exactly.
It's going to make you sicker. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a weight game.
Yeah.
When I say it's a weight game, it's what are the pros? What are the cons? The pros always outweigh the cons. In the bean world, no. And I grew up on beans, so I hate beans.
Yeah.
I hate beans.
Yeah. When I was vegan, I of course ate tons of beans. And when I started the doctoral journey in 2021, I was still very much on the vegan diet, and I have been for the past, 3 years. I quit and went carnivore very much like at the drop of a hat a year ago. And at the time, when I was early in the journey, I started working for a functional medicine provider in where I was living in Texas. And we were talking about diet. And of course, there's a lot of ways that functional medicine practitioners approach their clinical practice that I don't necessarily agree with from a philosophical perspective, which we can expand on that in a minute, because I'm curious to actually know what your thoughts are, because it matters moving forward. But to stay on topic, the point is I was eating loads of beans and she was eating a very different diet, albeit in alignment with the Mediterranean diet. She was like, oh, no beans because of the lectins. And from what we were being taught and what my understanding at the time was like, well, beans are great. Beans have this, 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 and this. And beans are fantastic. You probably shouldn't be having the chicken. The chicken's terrible for you, but the beans are awesome. Right. And so I'm over here having this argument with this provider who, I don't agree with whatsoever. But we're just in this kind of bidding war on what's the better way to fuel the body. Right. And this was before I even knew about the plant toxicology, because we were being impressed with plants. Plants are the way to health. eat all your vegetables, go ahead and throw red meat off the table, go ahead and throw dairy off the table. Don't even include those things in the diet. And if you have to, make sure that it's from, and this is exactly what the ADA's website says, the American Diabetic Association. When you look at their healthful eating page, it talks about protein sources, and they're listed categorically from order of priority of how they should be in your diet. Have you looked at that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I have not looked at that specific.
Right. Yeah. So what it looks like is it talks about plant proteins at the top, and it says like these are the all-star players in the protein game, right? And then it goes on to do like chicken, pork, eggs, and then at the very, very bottom, and I don't want to say that the print gets smaller, but I'm pretty sure the print has gotten smaller, and it says red meat is a rich source of saturated fat, which has been associated with cardiovascular disease. Red meat intake should be limited, and your selection should be from select or choice grades of beef. So not only should you limit red meat, right? But if you have to have it, be sure that you get the quality of meat that is most likely to be fed with corn, soy, and have the exposure to the not antioxidants, to the antibiotics and the growth hormones that they're pumping in them. And it just lights my fuse, because we are not only in this world that's, again, pushing plants to the end of the earth, but we are positioning ourselves as providers who have been trained. And I would say that we're both in the philosophy of functional medicine and integrative medicine, and we approach our care model as such, but our approach to health is very much not in alignment. And that's because I think we see this for what it is, right? Exactly. So that brings me to the discussion on how functional practitioners, and I can't speak for everybody, and I wouldn't dare speak for everybody, right? Just like you can't say all allopathic providers don't care about the nutrition and they tell you food has nothing to do with it, right? That's not the reality for everybody. So I'm not going to sit here and act like it is. I'm definitely animated right now. This stuff gets me hyped up, right? But have you noticed, or have you been exposed to any functional providers and noticed the way that they practice? And I'll preface it by saying that it's been my observation through a lot of research into not only the practice that I worked for, but the information that's available for other functional medical practices. They are taking, and they're going off and they're getting their IFMCP, the Institute for Functional Medicine Certified Practitioner, which is what we will be applying for at our matriculation. We'll become certified functional medicine providers. And they're getting that certification and saying, okay, I'm going to approach my medical model to be in alignment with the functional medicine philosophy for getting to the root cause. But instead of really healing the root, they are still living in that world of diagnostics and prescriptive, where instead of doing pharmaceuticals, they're doing nutraceuticals and supplements. And what they're doing is they're linking you, and they're still getting you hooked on an ongoing subscription. They have memberships with, it's called Full Script. It's like a wholesaler for pretty high quality. I'm not going to knock Full Scripts at all. I use them for high quality supplements that have actually gone through independent testing, and much better than like what you can generally find on Amazon for the most part. And so high quality supplements, they're getting you on a prescriptive regimen every month of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many puzzle pieces that you need attentive attention to. You're going to get supplements for all of those things. And we're just going to keep you coming. And because insurance companies don't support the functional medical model, you're going to pay out of pocket. It's tens of thousands of dollars just to get seen and to get established as a patient. But then I'm going to link you in for life with a recurring supplement and convince you that you need your fish oil and you need your vitamin A and you need your beta carotene and you need all of these supplements, because they're not looking at the reality of approaching the situation from a functional nutrition perspective. It's very much an allopathic mindset put into the functional medical model with the same output of keeping you dependent on the supplements and dependent on outside source and locked into their care, right? Because they're still living in the plants model, and they're not introducing nutrient dense foods. They're not eliminating the plant toxins, and they're keeping you in that sick model. Have you noticed that? Have you been exposed to anything like that? Because that's just my perception from a personal experience in the field and a lot of investigation into some of these functional medicine providers out there.
Some of them. Some
Yeah,
of them.
not all.
I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple who are absolutely amazing, and I
Yeah.
want to follow in their footsteps
Mm-hmm.
because they're on my mindset, let's fix it. And I believe in autonomous decision making.
Yeah.
So when I go into practice, I'm going to list out what's wrong. Let's go back to the mechanic scenario.
Yeah, I love it.
You pull your car into the mechanic, it's banging, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mechanic says, "Show me." So you turn it on, and of course, what happens? It's not banging
It's not
when the
banging.
mechanic is looking at
Yep.
it, right? So the mechanic says, "Let's take it for a test drive. You
Mm-hmm.
show me." Mechanic gets in the vehicle, you run
Mm-hmm.
around the block a couple of times, and then you hear the banging, right? So then pull it into the shop, lift up the hood, he starts tinkering around. You're standing right there and says, "Come here. This
Mm-hmm.
is what's going on with it, whatever is going on with it."
Yeah.
Says, give it a couple of goes, so on and so forth, and it gets fixed. If the mechanic can't fix it, the mechanic can give a couple of
Referral.
interesting scenarios, but then says, "Hey, I want you to see this mechanic because this mechanic might be able to diagnose this."
Right.
That would be the best mechanic you could
Mm-hmm.
ever find. Keep
Because
that
he's
mechanic.
honest. He's
Yeah,
honest.
honest, forthright, and gives
Mm-hmm.
you the autonomous decision.
Yeah.
So if the banging it doesn't occur, or if the banging is something that doesn't need to be fixed or
Mm-hmm.
addressed right now, say it's a $1,500 part, should you replace it? Yes. Do you need to replace it right now? No. Can you save up for it? Is there a way to kind of fix it, limp
Mm-hmm.
it along? If the
Yeah.
mechanic is honest with you and 100% loyal to his industry,
Yeah.
he would say, "This is what you need to do. This is the cause. This is what's happening. If you want to replace it now, you can. This
Mm-hmm.
is this is what I would do if I were you," and give you that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the medical industry. If you go into a doctor and they're fast to write a prescription and they throw it at you and get you out of the office in 7 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not a reliable person to go to. Same with
Yeah.
functional nutrition, same with any kind of person in any kind of medical realm. If you go in with a problem and it's a legitimate problem, and
Mm-hmm.
they won't sit there for an hour and a half, and really get involved and really get to the
Mm-hmm.
root of the problem and really get into the fix, and then send you on your way with a couple of options with the
Mm-hmm.
why established and
Yep.
the reasoning behind that,
And the
then you
how.
and the how is very important too. The when, why, where,
Huge.
how, huge,
All of
right?
it. Yeah.
And then you can make that decision. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have somebody pushing you and saying, you need to do, you need to go get this fixed, you need surgery, blah, blah, blah. When you
Mm-hmm.
have that and you say, well, what if I, instead of getting surgery, what if I go to physical therapy? Or
Yeah.
instead of taking this prescription medication, what if I go do this? Or
Yep.
instead of taking fish oil, what if I introduce fish into my diet?
Yep.
Those are the things that your provider, whoever you go to see, should be
Mm-hmm.
working with you to establish healthier lifestyle choices in
Right.
the long run, and making you a
Absolutely.
part of those choices, and not
Right.
saying you should or you need to do. Because
Yeah.
to me, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to
No.
facilitate change. We're here to facilitate your steps for a healthier you.
And that starts with giving you the autonomy. And I often say, like, integrative medicine puts you in the driver's seat. So like I have a clinical wellness practice, and it's like telemedicine essentially. But I work with my clients to establish the plan that again meets them where they're at. But that we as providers and as clinicians, we go through ethical training, right? And you've already mentioned the patient autonomy, and autonomy is having the say, and it's the right to have the say over what happens to your body and what you choose to do for health and disease, right? You get that choice. And I think oftentimes, especially in the social context, we are, no, I don't want to say bullied, but it's almost presented as if like it's this way or no way. And either you take the drugs or you're going to get more sick. And there's no other option because diet and lifestyle have nothing to do with it. And I mean, I know that I've been sitting in a doctor's office and left with the impression of like, do I even get a say? It's, you know what I mean? Like, and so
Right.
as integrative providers, like it's at the core of my practice and my philosophy and how I just truly believe we should be treating people at the end of the day, to put them in the driver's seat. And that's what I say to my clients all the time. Like, they expect to come into my virtual office and be like anticipating me to give them everything, but it's a conversation. It's, hey, Misty,
Mm.
tell me what's going on. Okay, well, what do you want to do about it? What's the biggest issue in your life? How do you want to address it? And I think that oftentimes people already have this mindset and this desire for how they want to approach their health when they go to the doctor, and they're just not met with that same level of respect and autonomy. And it's very much a, I'm the doctor, you're the patient, I'm smart, you're dumb, I'm big, you're little, right from Matilda. I'm right, you're wrong. And who are you to question me? And who are you to have an opinion? Well, I've been to medical school and I've paid thousands of dollars in an education, and I'm still paying off my student loans at 30 years old, and all of these things. And it is a level of bullying, if you ask me. And I don't want to go to the doctor and be bullied into the pressure to make a decision. Or, like, I mean, you go into that parasympathetic flight or fight mode, and it's like, well, I guess we're going to fight because I don't know how else to approach it. So I love that you bring up the mechanic scenario and the importance of recognizing that not only as patients do we have the autonomy to have a say over how we approach our care, but I think for a provider, it should be at the core of our ethical values. Ethics and values are the same thing. It should be at the center of our ethical paradigm that the patient matters the most. And I mean, we could get into rabbit holes on why providers act this way, why this is the standard of care, and why the pharmaceutical industry and the medical model and the nutritionist, and how all of these tiers of health are tied together into one big bow to make money. And I just don't see my patients as, like, as money bags. And I don't, I know that's a terrible way to say it, but like, I mean, am I
Yeah.
wrong?
No,
Yeah.
I'm okay with not making a whole bunch of money off of people.
Yeah. But I mean,
That's
and functional medicine's doing the same thing when it's tens of thousands of dollars to just become an established client. And I'm not exaggerating and I'm not joking. I used to have to do all the paperwork because I wasn't, I was a health coach because I was only just starting my functional medicine journey, my functional nutrition journey rather. So I did a lot of the onboarding and the paperwork and setting up the payment plans and doing all of that. And this one specific practice that I was at, it was $10,000 and it's out of pocket. And I'm sorry, ma'am, but your insurance, you can go ahead and try to file insurance. I will give you all of the paperwork. I will give you the write up and the diagnostic codes. I'll give you everything you need to go ahead and file a claim. But at the end of the day, I just want you to be prepared for the fact that insurance is not going to cover your claim because it does not make them money at the end of the day.
Well, I might be hated by the medical community, by all the medical community nuances, because I'm going to offer free advice. I'm going to put the caveat, it's not medical advice. It's autonomous decision making
Yeah.
in your hands. I'm putting you in the driver's seat and telling you, here's the gas pedal, here's the brake, here's the gear shift. Go.
Go adjust the mirror and so that you can't look back because
right.
yeah,
Because
you're right. Yeah.
because my channel is all about helping other people. I was diabetic.
Mhm.
I had high cholesterol. I had hypertension.
Mhm.
I was metabolically unfit.
Yeah.
Morbidly obese. I was not in a state of mind where I could even help people out.
Mhm.
And I was able to crawl out of that hole, fix
Mhm.
myself, and then I see other people in the same kind of holes,
Mhm.
and they're being led down astray. They're putting in
Mhm.
money hand over fist, and
Mhm.
they're exacerbating the problems.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, they're not getting fixed.
Yeah.
Why not? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's my premise of my dissertation that I'm working on is
Mhm.
what's wrong?
Mhm.
Where's the disconnect here?
The
Is
system is broken.
yeah, it's a broken system. So
Or
I'm here behind the scenes to help people get
Mhm.
healthier and realize that our medical community, our nutrition is in a wrong place right now. We are
Mhm.
taught that plants are good, wheat is good, oatmeal's the best you could ever eat.
Oh,
Eat
the
these big,
glyphosate is delicious.
right? The piece, the cake, the ice cream, the ding dongs, the dum dums, the ho hos, they're all delicious. And I hear this from everybody that I talk to who's overweight or obese
Health
is
at
it's
any size, right?
right. Not only that, but it's all about portion control, which I'm going to put right out there. It's
No.
BS.
Track
And
your macros.
right, track your macros and count your calories, which is
No.
all BS. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It
It's the
is.
sick model.
the sick model. And just to kind of put it out there, I don't know if I put it out there for my audience yet, but I'll put it out for your audience if I have. Forgive me if I overstate. I ended up on a bet, on a dare.
Mhm.
I ended up going into the ketogenic world, and I ended up tightening it up really tight.
Yeah.
And I ended up going into a 4,000 calorie diet.
Okay.
And all of my friends thought I was crazy. All of them thought I was stupid. They had words. They had words
Mhm.
behind my back, and I said, "I can do this."
Mhm.
So at first, I lost a couple of pounds, but that was the whole goal. Is I was saying I could lose a whole bunch of weight, but my body ended up becoming tighter because my muscle mass increased and
Mhm.
my muscle tone increased.
Mhm.
So not only that, so I was losing the visceral fat that
Mhm.
I had, but the 4,000 calories on the strict ketogenic. So I went from about 35 carbohydrates a day, and I put that down to about 15.
Okay.
That's behind everything, right? Behind the
Mhm.
numbers. And I
Yep.
really counted that. I was
Mhm.
diligent.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, this is before the carnivore world really took off. This is
Took off.
2018.
I mean, before keto even really took off.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I have been ketoing, besides the plant-based, since 2009.
Wow.
So yeah, that before everybody, I was told I was going to die then. Did
Mhm.
I die? No. So I went to 4,000 calories, and yeah, this was 2019.
Okay.
2019, I went to 4,000 calories, and then I increased it to 5,000 calories,
Mm.
still keeping the carbohydrates under 15 grams a day.
Mhm.
And then I went to 6,000 calories.
Wow.
That was really hard. That was really
That's
hard.
a
So
lot. That's a
I
lot
had
to eat.
to I had to
Yeah.
increase. I ended up eating a lot of macadamia nuts,
Mm.
weirdly enough, just to get the calories in.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, this is where my mitochondrial uncoupling came in. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, I was so hot all the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was like wearing nothing, and it was cold outside,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I feel fine. I feel great. And I was up all the time and stuff like that. But I was just always hot, just burning
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
And I didn't understand why at that moment, because mitochondrial uncoupling was a whole new world.
Mhm.
Um, it hasn't been broached yet. It
Which
still
your
is.
audience doesn't know, but I know that you're very much into from a scientific perspective.
Right, exactly, exactly. So I've got to talk more about that someday.
Yeah.
So then, just because I went to 7,000 calories a day. Now that is
Wow.
extreme, right?
That's a lot.
And
Yep.
I counted everything. Macadamia nuts, a lot of red meat, a lot of fat. And I
Mhm.
can't remember, there was a couple of other items, and I stopped eating eggs because eggs would fill me up and I couldn't
Mhm.
eat the calories.
Right.
So, but I wanted to prove that the calories weren't the issue.
Right.
The
Right.
body doesn't count calories.
So you said this was a dare?
This was a dare because
Okay.
I got
I'm
into
like,
an argument.
why are we fueling so extensively is my question. Right. But you said it was a dare, right? And you're trying to prove the calories in, calories out model is just absolute BS. Got
Right.
it.
I
Got
got
it.
into an argument with a friend
Yep. Yep.
because I
Yep.
was I
Yeah.
was ketogenic and she was poo-pooing the ketogenic, that I
Right.
needed to go and count calories because
Right.
that's how you lose weight, is
Right.
calories. And I
Calories.
had about 20, 25 more pounds to lose
Right.
at that point. And I was sitting there kind
So
of
what were the outcomes of this? 7,000 a day,
7,000 a day.
sweating your
And
tail off all day long.
oh, good gracious.
Yeah.
I was so hot. And do I regret the 7,000 calories? I could have put it back down to 4,000 calories. I really could have.
Yeah.
But I wanted to prove that point, and when
Mhm.
I get heated, I get serious and
Yeah.
mad. So anyway,
I don't do that at all, so I don't know what you're talking about.
so I tracked it, and I ended up losing 17 pounds, but it started to stagnate.
Mhm.
And the muscle structure. So all of a sudden, I was getting the muscle, all the muscle structures were starting to show, and my collarbone was starting to show, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. I'm trying to think. My leg muscles were getting toned and fit, and I wasn't
Were
doing much
were you
more.
doing any activity or any I was gonna ask any exercise? Were you lifting, doing any
Not more than usual. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I went on an ook pick. So I do bushcrafting, but I haven't done in quite a while since my PhD.
Yeah.
But go and do extreme camping, extreme outdoors.
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing a bushcraft. And
Yeah.
I told them, because I went with Boy Scouts, and I told them that I was on an extreme diet, and they packed my lunch full of sugary stuff. And they said, "Well,
Oh gosh.
you need to keep your calories up." Notice? Notice? So there was this sugar gel,
Ew.
Twizzlers, Twinkies. There was a couple of Twinkies in there. There was a couple of candy bars in there. And I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff. It's because the boys need all that calories to maintain because, well,
That's what
at
they
that
need in the wilderness for survival,
right,
Twinkies.
right. So in the mountains, it was actually warmer than what I had expected. It was about 14 degrees.
Yeah.
About 20 degrees during the day, and it dipped down to about 14, 13 degrees at night. So it
Mhm.
wasn't that bad. It's when it gets below zero is when you kind of regret things.
Yeah,
And so we
definitely.
ended up making a snow tunnel called a Quincy
Yeah.
and sleeping in there. So I dug myself a tunnel and we slept the night in there with my son and I. And he's so funny because he slept like a rock, and I was sitting there at 2 in the morning shivering.
Mm.
Snow is not
Because
comfortable.
your caloric intake had taken such a dip, though. You went from fueling at about 7 kilocalories a day down to
Well, I
what?
didn't eat any of the stuff,
Right.
so I ended up
Oh, okay.
fasting.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part about it is I ended up fasting because that's what the lunch packed, and we
Right.
didn't get an actual proper lunch until we got to the lodge again
Mhm.
that next afternoon.
Wow.
So I ended up in my satchel, I ended up taking 2 eggs that I had pre-cooked and some sausage
Mhm.
links, and that's it. And that's
Wow.
all I had. So, yeah, you're right. So 7,000 calories a day down to whatever, 2 eggs and 2 or 3 links of sausages.
1,000, if that.
Yeah, so that's it, that's all I had, but
What a crazy journey, though, to go on just to prove to your friend that the ketogenic diet is not eat fat, get fat. Because
right,
that's the thought right now is eat fat, get fat. It's not how it
exactly.
works at all.
So then we got back from Ukpik, and, what was it, maybe 2 weeks later, we got the word that the world was going into quarantine,
Mm.
and, well, I went to the crazy enough, I had gone to the store and there was no toilet paper on the shelves.
Ah, I
And I
remember.
was
Yeah.
actually, if you remember it, so I call it the great toilet paper crisis of 2020 because that's how it pretty much started. I went to the grocery store and there was no toilet paper at
Yeah.
all. And I thought, well, what's going
Before
on?
before the hysteria. Yep.
Right. And then 3 weeks later, here we are, and it's done. Like the
Mhm.
world is done. And it was eerie going out on the road alone because there's nobody out. I'm telling you though,
Is the
downtown Denver looked
best.
pretty good though, because
Yeah.
there was nobody there and there was
Mhm.
no black cloud that loomed over Denver.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one last question before we leave.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say to your followers or anybody who was looking to get started on maybe working with you and they say, "You know what? I love your thoughts and I love your stance on functional nutrition and I'm ready to kind of maybe take that next step." What do you want to tell them?
Oh, I encourage everybody to DM me if they want to receive more advice, not medical, just autonomous decision making advice. And I'm
Yes.
going to put you in the driver's seat here. I want you to reach out to me and just let me know, what you're interested in. And I could put out a video too. That's
Yeah,
always in my realm too. So,
absolutely.
and you and I are always going to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope our audiences both glean a lot of information from us.